A very warm welcome to everyone who's here today to listen further information about our South and East Network for Social Sciences and CAM-DTP competition. As you will see, I'm joined by Professor Michelle Ellefson, who's the director for CAM-DTP. We're here to give you some basic information around the competition, the first inter-DTP competition that we're launching, and of course to answer any questions you might have. We've done one of these webinars already. The recording for that webinar is on the website, and it's also on our YouTube channel. And hopefully we will also be recording this one. We are actually recording, and we'll be posting it online in case we've got a different set of questions. Michelle is also helping me monitor the Q&As there, and she will have to take over if my internet connection fails, as I'm currently abroad, and my internet connection is not always as stable as I expect it to be. Without further ado, I'll start the webinar and see whether I can change. Giving you a bit of outline in terms of the things we will be covering, talking a bit about the purpose and the background for this competition, the process and some basic rules. Everything we will be sharing with you is already in the documentation. There is extensive documentation on the two websites. And then I'll say a bit more about the criteria, what we expect to see in these applications, student responsibilities, and the timeline, predominantly around the deadlines and everything like that. I'm pleased to say that despite being summer and this is the first time we're launching a competition like this, we have already quite a substantial number of applications. I received an update earlier today from my team, and there are currently 14 applications in the making in the website. Some of them are almost complete. Some of them are in the process of being submitted, and that's almost a month before the actual deadline of the competition, which demonstrates that there is a lot of appetite for collaborations like this. Let me tell you first of all a bit of background, and Michelle, feel free to chip in if you want. This is something that started when the two DTPs were in kind of discussions about the formation of the DTPs. We decided that it was going to be quite a big exercise to actually form one DTP, but we then said, okay, we've spent so much time talking to each other, aligning each other in terms of the training, in terms of our EDIs, in terms of the strategic directions of the DTPs. Let's try to promote further collaboration. And the idea came through that what we could do, we could organically grow supervisory capacity in the two DTPs in the inter-DTP domain by formulating a competition that we will be launching together. And the main prerequisite for colleagues to apply to that competition would be to form supervisory teams that include members from universities that are part of the two DTPs. So there has to be at least one supervisor from each DTP in the supervisory team for someone to apply to this competition. It doesn't necessarily matter which is going to be the primary supervisor and which is going to be the secondary supervisor, but the supervisory teams should have members from universities that form the two DTPs. And the proposals must clearly demonstrate a genuine cross-DTP and cross-disciplinary approach. For example, in questions I have received so far, it looks like expertise that is missing from one DTP is actually being brought in from the other DTP, and these are kind of the applications we would like to see. Supervisory teams that building on expertise that doesn't necessarily exist in one of the two DTPs, and bring that supervisory expertise from the other DTP. And what we also like to see is interdisciplinary nature in the proposals. And again, that goes back to a few of the proposals that have been developed so far, where we see people coming from a social sciences background, building on expertise that you can find in engineering or in medical studies, and submitting a social sciences question. I think for us, the main issue here that we need to address is because these are ESRC funded studentships, we need to very clearly demonstrate to our funder, who is the Economic and Social Research Council, that the question that is being asked is a social sciences question, and it's not a question that can be actually funded from one of the other councils. And we have ring-fenced 2 studentship, one of which will be located in each of the DTPs, and we hope to have this competition running on an annual basis, which means that we've got this competition and the potential for another 3 competitions in the future, a minimum 3, depending on the way the SRC will move forward post this round of calls for DTPs, a minimum of this one and a minimum of another 3 over the next few years. So that means that if someone from the attendees is currently exploring, thinking about a proposal, but they haven't yet fully established the team, they find the deadline being too close, and they don't have the opportunity to develop a fully fleshed proposal, this is not the last chance. There will be other chances in the next few years, and possibly the competition deadline will be slightly earlier to align better with what the 2 DTPs want to achieve, because this is the first year we're running the competition, and we had to sort out and iron out a lot of the details, and we had to postpone the launch and the application deadline to early September. But hopefully from next year onwards, the application deadline will be before everybody leaves for summer. The process, as I said, and I'll keep on stressing this information every single time I can. We need to have at least 1 supervisor from each of the DTPs, and the research question and the relevant proposal, they need to be embedded very clearly in social sciences. And what then the team does is develops that proposal to apply for funding for a studentship. Now, it's also helpful here to make a clarification point that I tend to do quite a lot, especially when I talk to our supervisors. We run a collaborative project competition at SENSS. This is not a research associate. This is not a research assistant position. This is a PhD studentship. And what is the difference between a PhD studentship from a research assistant is that there is also a significant element of training that is required for that student. Is not someone who is there to deliver a research project without actually receiving the necessary training. And a common pitfall I see in application is that they design the proposal and the project in a way that it's almost like you need someone at the postdoc level to do that. And that's a very common mistake in these type of competitions when you have supervisor-led proposals. And one of the things we would like to see is we would like to see how the cross-supervisory and the cross-DTP supervisory teams will be able to support the student to develop the necessary skills to undertake that project. So that element of training is actually quite important in these studentships, and this is what the SRC is asking us to do. There are also opportunities here within this competition if someone wants to bring an external collaborative partner, and we would welcome these type of applications where you have supervisory team members coming from the 2 DTPs and an external collaborative partner coming forward, and in the form of a non-higher education institution. They could be a business, they could be a third sector charity organization, they could even be local government or national government organizations. And we strongly encourage that. We appreciate that, again, it's relatively tight, the deadline for the development of a collaboration, so it's not a requirement. But if you have a partner that you would like to invite into the proposal and perhaps have a collaborative supervisor from that partner, that would be really encouraged from our side. We're using a platform that is currently being used for all SENSS competitions. It's called HEI Apply. It's a very straightforward platform. You create your profile. If you have any problems with the platform, I've got our admin team that is there to support you and resolve any issues you might have. And irrespective of who is the lead academic, whether it's a Cambridge academic, CAM-DTP academic, Cambridge or ARU, or a SENSS lead academic, all applications have to be submitted via this platform. And the deadline for the submission is the 10th of September 2025. So we still got just over a month before the final deadline. What's going to happen afterwards is, in terms of the process, we will be forming a shift panel, which will be scrutinizing applications. Representatives from both DTPs will be sitting on the panel, and we will be selecting the best 4 proposals to advertise for studentships. And then what we will do is we will advertise those proposals on jobs.ac.uk, through our website, through our partner institutions. We will open the platform for applications on the 20th of October, and those applications will close on the 7th of January. The best 2 applicants across the 4 proposals are the ones that will be awarded the studentship to work on that project. So in effect, there are 2 stages in the process. There is the stage which is the selection of the 4 best proposals, and then those 4 best proposals will recruit students. We will shortlist the best students, and we'll offer the opportunity to the 2 best students. And that's the way the 2 best proposals will also be decided. So it's a combination of the student quality and the proposal quality. And it's a model that at SENSS we have used in the past in another inter-DTP competition. We used to run a competition with ERIS, which is one of the DTPs funded by NERC, the National Environment Research Council. And that has been a process that we have been following, and it has resulted in very, very strong students being recruited there. The rules of the competition, and again, the 2 most important ones is that we need to get proposals from supervisory teams that are across the 2 DTPs, formed across the 2 DTPs, and they also fall within the ESRC remit. We do get very frequent questions about applications which could have been easily funded by MRC, the Medical Research Council, or EPSRC. And the answer there is that we will always get questions by ESRC if we start funding proposals that fall under the remit of other councils. So there has to be a very clear research question within social sciences, and also they need to be aligned with the thematic areas or the steers of SENSS and CAM. So each of the 2 DTPs has this set of thematic areas, steers, and the proposal needs to be aligned with one of those. Each supervisory team may submit only 1 application for this cross DTP. And of course, if there is an external collaborator, as I mentioned earlier, that external collaborator is expected to provide an additional supervisor. We don't expect usually that additional supervisor to be, in every supervisory meeting, for example, but we expect them to tell us how they will be engaging with the project of the student and how they will be offering input and support to the student. In terms of eligibility, we follow the eligibility requirements of the 2 DTPs, and effectively, early career researchers would still qualify for supervisors. If, for example, there is someone who has no completions, we would expect at least a member of the supervisory team to have someone who has completed or supervised the PhD student to completion. And if neither of the 2 supervisors, the primary or the secondary from the 2 institutions, don't have that, one of the 2 host institutions will have to provide kind of a 3rd supervisor that has that completion rate or completion kind of benchmark. We expect supervisors to have undertaken supervisory development training, and we ask about that in the application. And the funding for these applications can range between 3.5 years to 4.5 years. The 3.5 years is for a candidate that comes straight with a very solid, strong background in social sciences. So someone that has done a social sciences master's, for example, that they have done an element of research methods into that. And the 4.5 years is usually used for undergraduate students that have minimum research training or training in research methods, or someone who perhaps comes from a very different background and they haven't encountered any social sciences research methods training so far. Something that is also quite important to highlight here is that the ESRC has changed, has pushed a significant cultural change in terms of the funding end period and completion period. And the SRC in the past was allowing us to separate the two. So you could have the funding end period at 3 years, and then the student would receive an additional year as a write-up year from their home institution. And they could spend that 1 year as an unfunded student to complete the PhD. Right now, the SRC is asking us to align the funding end period with the completion period, which means that the amount of funding period we will be giving to the student determines also when the student has to submit their PhD. If the student fails to submit the PhD within the funding period, that means then that is considered by SRC as a non-completion, effectively. And what they've done is they've given us 0.5 half a year in addition to the 3 years for 2 reasons. One is to cover any additional training. So they expect the 0.25, the 3 months to be the additional training, and the other 3 months are expected to cover for a placement that the students should undertake as part of their PhD, and that placement needs to be in an external organization. The typical academic and residential eligibility requirements apply for this scheme. In very short and without going into details, the full rules and regulations are there. Anybody who doesn't have British citizenship, a settled or a pre-settled status, if they come from European Union, is considered an international applicant. And international applicants are subject to a quota for ESRC. At the moment, we haven't constrained applications from international applicants to this scheme, so we could receive applications from international applicants for this inter-DTP, and the fees for those international applicants are, at least in the SENSS point of view, there is an agreement from the partners that we cover the additional fees, so there is a fee waiver for international applicants. I think CAM-DTP has a slightly different approach. Michelle, you want to say 1 or 2 words there?
Yes, so ours is dependent on the university, whether there are fee waivers, and that was decided by our individual universities rather than the DTPs. So the best thing is should you go through this competition, and if you have an international student, that you get in contact with us, and then we'll explain based on the university where that student would be based.
Yeah. So this is part of the second phase of this competition, where the studentship recruitment, the student recruitment will take place. But just to keep that in mind, because I have had cases, for example, last year from SENSS in the collaborative projects where we had collaborative partners coming from the Global South. And the key question was that, are we allowed to recruit an international applicant, because the best applicant for that project was actually based in that country. And again, there is a part of the form that asks you for additional research costs, if there are any additional research costs, things like field works and things like that. And this will be provided by each DTP according to its standard processes and limits. So it's something that we do allow as part of the application, but then we have maximum amounts that we can award. There are 5 areas for the supervisor phase of the competition, and these are in a way mirrored for the studentship phase. As you can see, the most important criterion out of the 5 is the quality and the feasibility of the proposal, which almost 40%, it is 40% of the weight. Then we're looking at interdisciplinarity and the impact potential of the proposal. We do look at the suitability and feasibility for the project for a studentship. So again, the thing I've mentioned earlier about ensuring that this is fit for purpose for a PhD student and not a research assistant project, it's something that we take into consideration. We look then at the quality of the collaboration, the justification why the supervisory team has been put together, supervisory expertise, and then of course the quality of and the relevance of the training and the integrated placement. So what you need to be thinking about is, as supervisory teams, what training will you be offering the student? How do you ensure that the student gets trained to deliver this particular project? And although we don't require you to have secured the placement at this point, what we would like you to do is think about the placement and how that placement fits within the wider project and what that placement offers the student. The typical pitfall I get to see in applications, especially in this area, is a copy-paste of the university's doctoral college kind of information. And that is basically sometimes what people do is copy paste the doctoral college information into the training section, say our university offers this training training from the doctoral college. That's not what we expect to see here. What we expect to see here is how is the supervisory expertise being leveraged to train the student in a way that the student can develop and deliver the project. Now, the student responsibilities, assume you move forward and go forward to the recruitment. The student will be registered to the same university that employs the primary supervisor, and then they're expected to follow the core program, the induction, the processes that apply to that university. But what we could also do is we will be working with those supervisory teams to plan a supplementary project to leverage the training opportunities across the 2 DTPs. Just to give you one example, the 2 DTPs delivered a fantastic workshop on research in practice placements. We did it on the 18th of June, hosted by Goldsmiths University, which is one of the SENSS partners. We had the cohort by the 2 DTPs coming together, and they received presentations from students from the 2 DTPs that had already undertaken placements. And so we expect to leverage more these common training events. And, of course, the student of this inter-DTP, they will be part of the, they will be the lucky ones being part of the 2 cohorts, both the SENSS cohort as well as the CAM-DTP cohort. And they will be offered opportunities to kind of attend conferences from SENSS, organized from SENSS, conferences organized by CAM-DTP, everything like that. And we will be doing the development needs analysis. That is also part of the application process. So the student in their application, they will do an initial development needs analysis, and then both DTPs have training managers in place that can support the supervisory teams to even further think about additional opportunities and additional training that these students will receive. So in essence, the mandatory part of it is where the student will be based, and then the student and the supervisory team will be offered a wide range of additional training opportunities that they can tap into. But from an administrative point of view, the DNA, the DTP activity, the UKRI research fees submission on an annual basis will be based within their home institution and their home DTP. Now, the timeline for the supervisor phase, just to give you a sense, we've launched it a few weeks back. We're now into the process of the final stretched to the actual deadline for the competition up to the 10th of September, 4 p.m. Is the deadline. We then are going to share the applications across the two DTPs. We're going to do an initial sifting within institution just to make sure that the applications have gone through some form of due diligence, and then there will be a panel that will be reviewing and evaluating applications with a view to kind of give a sense to supervisors in early October who are the 4 ones that are moving forward to full advertisement. And then what's going to happen is the student adverts will go live on the 20th of October. And at that point, we will be leveraging our social media presence, our websites to attract the best talent in those studentships. From a student point of view, although from a supervisor point of view, you're not allowed to submit more than 1 application, from a student point of view, the students are allowed to submit applications to this competition, to our collaborative competition at SENSS, as well as to the student-led competition. So if a student wants to apply in all competitions, depending on their interest on particular projects, there is no kind of barrier for them to do that. So we have liberalized fully kind of the way we approach students. And then this is the studentship timeline, perhaps more relevant to those that will move on to the next stage, but just to give you a sense of what's going to happen is we expect the supervisory teams to also leverage their connections in order to advertise those projects. 7th of January is going to be the cutoff, the deadline for student applications, and then we're going to have a separate panel from SENSS Cambridge to evaluate those applications and make recommendations to the management boards of the two DTPs with a view to have the outcome circulated by the 7th of April. So the student and the supervisor know, when that they will have a studentship on the 7th of by the 7th of April, commencing in October 2026. So that's the kind of the timeline for that. Any additional information here for those part of CAM-DTP? The email is cam-dtp@admin.cam.ac.uk. For those at SENSS, it's the equivalent, which is admin@senss-dtp.ac.uk. Only in the case where you have specific questions about the HEI Apply platform, please direct them directly to SENSS. Don't go through your admin at your home DTP because SENSS is the part of this competition that controls the application platform, and we have the expertise to support colleagues. We've got on the SENSS website, we've got a specific micro site for this competition, which has already the recording of the previous webinar, and hopefully in the next few days we will be posting the recording from this webinar as well. Both webinars will also be available through our YouTube channel. So if you have students that are thinking about that and they might work with you on a project, you could forward them the YouTube link and they can watch it from wherever they are. As I said, the first webinar, which was delivered a few weeks back, is already there. And this webinar, the recording from this webinar, will be posted shortly. Michelle, any additional points from your side? I think I've left enough time for questions and answers if there are any colleagues that might want to ask questions. You could either use the chat or the questions and answers part.
Maybe while people are writing their questions, I will say, again, just like the first webinar, how similar our processes are. So each DTP can do have a wide range of choices in terms of how to deal with the SOC requirements, but our processes are so similar. So we're hoping that means that when we do this joint studentship, it won't be so different for supervisors and for students.
And also I think it's if I may add there, it's a fantastic opportunity because the vision for these studentships is that we will have gradually a mini cohort being developed. So you've got 2 every year. So by the end of this round of a call for DTPs, you will have 6-8 students working together across the 2 DTPs, and that will be a fantastic kind of point to demonstrate to the ESRC the value that the DTPs can generate. And of course the studentships can also act as additional glue for supervisory teams that might started working on something or might want to work on something together, and so far they haven't got the opportunity to do that.
Yes, it can be a really nice complement. But we've got one question. I was going to say that it can be a very nice complement to a grant project, for example, that may already exist.
The application asks, how do you expect the studentship to be split across departments? Are you just expecting 100% for the supervisor or something else? No, I think what we expect is the supervisor to give us a sense of the supervisory team. One of the things which we have to clarify here is that from a HISA point of view and an admin point of view, the student will be submitted through the department of the primary supervisor and the host DTP. But we expect, and this is where we ask statements of support from head of schools, we expect the second supervisor to be actively involved in that.
And so this would be giving us a sense of the proportion of time they would be spending with each supervisor.
And of course, it will depend as well on the input of that supervisor into the projects. I said, so far I have received questions from colleagues saying, we want to do a social sciences project, but it needs a bit of it needs engineering input in terms of the actual process, the technology part. And these are the proposals we would expect to see coming through this competition. I think most people have.
There we go.
Yeah. So Suzanne, I'm sorry, I'm reading the application for the purposes, I'm reading the question for the purpose of the video. So the application guidance also says, we would strongly encourage you to seek a financial contribution to the project from your partner, up to a maximum of 50% of the full cost of the studentship, noting that this may be taken into consideration during the selection process. So that's only for the projects that have a collaborative partner involved, so someone who's not an HEI partner. It's just an encouragement, and we don't make it a part of the selection criteria. So nowhere do we actually evaluate a project's kind of appeal or strength on the basis of the collaborative partner contribution. The only case where we would use the financial contribution as a kind of tiebreaker is where we would have, and so far I haven't seen it happening. We ran the collaborative competition over several years at SENSS, and I haven't used that criterion once. It's only when 2 projects are deemed from the panel to be of exactly equal value, and they both have collaborative partners, and in one case, the collaborative partner brings a direct financial contribution, and in another case, the partner doesn't bring one. In that case, and that case only, we would use that as a tiebreaker for the panel. And as I said, most of the time, there are other ways to break that tie in panel discussion, so we never resort to that kind of financial contribution. So we don't expect we don't expect to especially charities, we would be clearly disadvantaging charities if we were to have a direct. what we would expect, though, in this case, is a clear demonstration of how that collaborative partner brings value to the project. So, and in the case of charities, most of the time is the partner's contribution in terms of the supervision of the student. So, how the person that comes in from that collaborative partner, that charity, as a third supervisor, adds value to the project and makes that project, truly unique for the student. Yeah, so if that's something that you already have, that's fantastic. And of course, it would be fantastic to have the tripart way of CAM-DTP, SENSS-DTP, and the collaborative partner, because that brings even more strength into a proposal.
I think in the past we have sometimes had charities make contributions, not up to, not 50%, but they've sometimes made smaller contributions to studentships if the studentship is really tightly aligned to the remit of the charity. So the charity is really getting something from it as well. And so I'm not saying that in the case that Susanna has raised that is the situation, but I suppose it's kind of thinking about if a charity is getting something a lot from the PhD studentship, then sometimes it could be useful that they are making a financial contribution, because that also makes it a bit tighter in terms of the expectations all the way around. But quite oftentimes it may be that there's someone in a charity who's offering just the right expertise, and so that in-kind contribution of their time is the suitable thing to be recognized in the partnership. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of that those contributions are kind of representative of what the studentship is looking like.
And Michelle, I have always gone back the opposite way as well, because I remember there was a project a few years back from a collaborative, in our collaborative competition, which it was with a large business organization who was very clearly getting intellectual property out of the PhD project, and there was very clear commercial value to the project, and yet there was no direct financial contribution. And I actually had to go back to the supervisors and the collaborative partner and say, look, this is not aligned with the way we would like to spend the money. I can't fund a PhD studentship simply to give you development of intellectual property. You need, without you committing something from a financial point of view to the project. It's almost like as I'm offering you free money in reality. So we're always, and if there are things like that, it's better to discuss them with either Michelle or myself, depending on which DTP you come, so we can help you shape the proposal in the best possible way. I think we've said so many things during the presentation itself, and the guidelines is so detailed there that perhaps colleagues don't have any other questions. I don't want to take up more of people's time if there are no more questions. As I said, the recording will be available. The information is on the websites. There is a very detailed guidance. If you've got any questions, you could always ask them, and we will be responding to them. So far, it looks like there is a lot of interest so far in terms of this competition. So unless there are any other questions, perhaps we can bring this webinar to a close.
That's great. Thank you, Fragkiskos, for your presentation today.
Thank
we
you
got
very
lucky
much.
Your internet cooperated the whole time.
Yes, yes. And thank you to everyone who has attended today's session. As I said, if you've got any further questions, feel free to let us know and send those questions to us. And as I always say, there are no such thing as silly questions, because from our side, it's also the first time we're running this competition, and we would like to make it a success. We would like to ensure that everybody gets a fair chance in submitting a proposal. So if you've got any kind of question, please direct them to us. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.